or something? Yeah.
Oh, yes, the breakfast.
The breakfast?
Yes.
Yeah. That'll be nice. I've never been invited to that.
Well, this is the first.
Oh, this is the first one.
Did they get the information?
Sorry, Diane.
Yeah, I have it. That's right. Yes.
I
There is a sign up front. People don't realize in case you do want to be speaking or presenting to the board, there is a sign up at the last moment to sign up. Not because you need extra people, but that's Back to public session. Let's go ahead and pledge of allegiance. Join us.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Stephen,
No, go ahead.
before you do that, I would like to add item G4F to the agenda. That is a field trip for the varsity baseball team to Florida.
G4L.
My motion with the addition.
Motion with the addition. Second with the addition.
And I'll second that then.
Vote on it, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I think our next step this morning is to move on to building reports.
Yes, we have
Jack,
Jackie.
you're on.
Okay. Gatawal. The start of a Gatawal, you know, so this is just the beginning of what we're doing here. Okay. We started this school year with the analogy of the caterpillar and the changes that a caterpillar goes through to become a butterfly. And so with that, we also started with a dedicated group of people who agreed to be the building data team. And I have to say, I said, it's going to be just like core team, meetings once a month. And within, well, the last 3 months, we've had 12 meetings. And so they really have gone above and beyond. They've scheduled extra meetings to look at the data, to look at what we need to be doing, and try to figure out where we're headed. And I just want to publicly say how much I appreciate the hard work. And Sue Moscato is a member of our data team, so thank you for being here, Sue, and just all of the hard work that they have been doing. So our results, our math results from the 2011 New York State assessment have been up and down. Our passing rate in some grade levels went up, some grade levels went down, some of our numbers of 4s went up and down. We have, as you can see, a variety of where we're going. And so as we're looking at that, what we're looking to do is make sure that we're moving our 2s to our 3s and looking at what the reasons are that students are getting 1s. And we're doing the same thing with our ELA. And we're working with the data warehouse and drilling down with Greg's help, thank you very much, and trying to figure out, okay, what can we see as a cause for this? And one of the things that causes us some concern is the state's not allowing us to see the tests, so we can get a general idea, but we can't see a specific question to know, was it a term, was it a phrase, was it something that we're not teaching or that we need to be teaching? So we're kind of generalizing as much as we can and yet trying to be as specific as we can too. So what we came up with after drilling down is that our language arts area, critical analysis and evaluation is an area that we need to look at, and that involves vocabulary and test-taking vocabulary and background knowledge to connect with the text that the children are asked to read on the state assessments. The algebra strand and the math is another area of weakness, and the biggest area of concern at this point was the lack of understanding of place value when comparing numbers, and the deficiency in knowing basic math facts, and we go through this every year. Third grade teachers teach them, fourth grade teachers teach them, and fifth grade teachers teach them, and I'm sure there are some middle school teachers who would say they don't know the multiplication facts yet. So we're trying to really make sure that our kids know from K to 5 their math facts. The other goal that we set as a building was that, the size of this building, and sometimes it's hard for us to feel like we are all together as in a community here. So we decided that we needed to do some things to foster that feeling of community. And so we came up with our plan, and this is what we are looking at. We are asking the grade levels at the grade level meetings to, well, let me go back to this one first. All of our teachers will be instructing their students on Larry Bell's 12 powerful words, and a couple of years ago, the administrators went to staff development a workshop with Larry Bell, and he has research that shows that when students are instructed in these words, it does make a difference in their academic achievement, their test-taking skills, and in their thinking skills. And the words that we're talking about are higher level thinking, and they are the words that are used in the test-taking or in test questions. And so our concern is, do they know what their question is asking them to do when it says summarize? So there are a lot of resources online that we can use for free. And so we are going to be making charts and adjusting the words and the definitions for kindergartners to be able to understand it, fifth graders to be able to understand it, and everyone will be teaching those words in some format in their classes. Grade level meetings, the teachers will be looking at the vocabulary lists that a few years ago they worked on across the district at their grade levels, and they'll be looking at what words they can eliminate so they don't have a 12-page list of ELA terms to try to teach their kids, but we'll be able to look at it in conjunction with the Common Core so that they can really focus on what words will make a difference too. We have Study Island as a program in the district, and we are asking our teachers to use it and make sure that parents know about it, and that there are times scheduled in computer labs and at home when possible for the kids to become better in language arts skills and in math skills. The math focus, we are looking at the IXL program. I would say most of the teachers here at Union Pleasant do use IXL, but we are saying now it is an expectation. And again, getting parents on board, knowing that they can use this at home, giving students practice at home and in the classroom and in the computer labs. And again, Study Island to modify instruction and give students practice. So we have grade level meetings. This month we're kind of doing a basic, here's what you're going to expect at your grade level meetings. Each grade level will be getting a board somewhat like this, and will be asked to post their data on this, and they'll be looking at student work, the benchmarks when those benchmarks are done, and in between those times of the benchmark, they'll be looking at student work and assessments that they give, and looking to see where areas of weakness are under the umbrella of our school improvement plan. They'll be setting a goal for the next month and then looking back to see how well they've either met that goal or what they need to adjust in order to set a better goal for their kids. And our sense of community goal, we decided that we wanted to increase the number of school-wide interdisciplinary events for the 2011-12 school year. Our problem is neither one of our auditoriums will hold all the kids at one time, and so we have to kind of work around that. We kind of, maybe we're stretching it a little bit, but for our kindergarten Halloween parade, everyone was in the hallway cheering them on. So that was an all-school event. We were all involved in that. At our level 1 Christmas concert, we invited the upper grade levels, and of course they had to have reservations, so I said, get your reservations in early because there's a limited number of seats. The concert during the day. And so we did have some 4th and 5th grade classes come down and watch the first graders, which was the first time we've been able to do that in a long time. We had a Veterans Day assembly for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade where we had veterans come in. They had a Humvee here. The kids too. Actually, it was the whole auditorium was filled. The kids were not in a Humvee was outside, but they did a presentation for us. And then I just wanted to mention the tailgate for technology that we had this past Sunday. Our teachers worked very hard to raise some money for technology, and we, at this point, have raised $1,500 since Sunday. So getting back to the Caterpillar, it's a process of change, and sometimes, you know, we feel like we're biting off more than we can chew, but we know that this is something that we need to focus on, and we're up for it. And we know that it's going to give us better results. It's probably going to bring us a lot of unexpected answers, but it's going to also help us to grow as professionals. So again, I'd like to thank the building data team, and you know, I'm sure you'll be hearing more from us throughout the year. So.
Jackie, just one question. The memo that we received and then was pulled back in terms of guidelines for testing that, you know, illustrated a pretty significant increase in the amount of time students are going to be tested. We expect that to change a little bit, but, you know, the word is there that longer tests, longer assessments are going to impact, particularly the elementary level. How do you see some of the work you're doing impacting our students' ability for them to have the stamina, basically, to participate in the test for a longer period of time?
Well, I think, you know, with our writing workshop that we've started, that in itself is that the teachers are having the students write a lot more than they ever have. And we're looking at that too, if we're going to be looking at what the work looks like. But I think it's just one of those things we're going to have to work on, and just to be aware. I did mention that at one of our meetings that the memo came out, and I read it and went, oh my gosh, and Jim was talking about, oh my gosh, how do we have to serve dinner for the kids, you know, because the assessment could take that long for students that have some accommodations, you know. So, and then it was pulled back, and so I said, get ready, because it probably is not going to change too much. And it just, my big concern is last year we had 4th graders who in the middle of the test just stopped and started crying because they just said, I can't do this. And the test is going to get longer, it's going to become more difficult. So, you know, we need to somehow let them know you do your best, you work really hard, your effort's going to pay off, and we'll get you through this. You know, and I think that's just the attitude we're going to have to work on all year with the kids, and just expect them to be doing more work as throughout the school year too. All right, thank you. Now, we have another
Thank you very much.
presentation set up over here for you, so we don't rest
Yes,
on
thank
technology.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. Very nice, Jeff. Very much. Thank you. That was a very nice presentation. Thanks, Ricky. Okay.
Budget discussions.
Yes, next we have, and again, we've had a couple of work sessions for the budget discussion so far. What I wanted to do was continue some of the dialogue that we started at the last session, but focus in particularly this evening on the expenditure, so you can see where the expenditure increases are coming from. And at the last meeting, we talked about the $3.5 million gap that we had. And we gave you some numbers, but tonight we'd like to be a little bit more specific in terms of where that information is. So Barb has prepared a presentation for you. You received the handout here. And Barb, I'd ask you to lead us through this if you would, please.
Okay.
Technology is great, but I do like my table. What the superintendent asked me to prepare for everybody this evening was basically an overview on our big ticket expenditure items. So as we go through this and as you look through what you've got in front of you, you're going to see that, you know, if you take the time to add up all the numbers, there is no real budget total here. Because there are things that we're calling that our real large ticket items that we haven't provided to you. So this gets us to a really large number, but it is not the total number, but it provides the opportunity to see what we think how our expenses really are grouped And what those major groups are, of course, our biggest expense in the budget is salary. What we have here is our anticipated salary on a rollover budget for all employees. If the employee is eligible for an incremental pay raise, that is included in this number. For folks that don't have increment, say for example somebody like myself, the number that's included in this expenditure amount is a flat number, the same as this year, no raises. So what we put in there is what we know, what we can control today, not necessarily where we're hoping it will end up. So that is, you can see our salary expenditures for 11-12, nearly 29 million, projected 12-13, pushing closer to 30, 29,772, 656. $862,567 increase.
Barbara, is that 862, is that number, like, do teachers get paid just incrementally, or are there some pretty big steps along the way?
Well,
Can we assume that of the 862, all our teachers are going to get, a reasonable percentage of their salary for that? Is that like a 3% increase for everyone?
Well, it really depends on where they are in the step schedule.
Okay.
So the step schedule is something that had, over the years, was worked out between management and the union. They used to be able to spread the dollars on the step schedule the way they saw fit. So I wouldn't say necessarily that it's equitable, that everybody would get the same thing, or that would be very misleading, but it is based on the contract and the schedule that's set forth in the contract.
Can I just, you said they can spread that money the way they see fit. Who are you referring to?
Historically, when the contract's been negotiated in the past, not necessarily this time, but there was a value that was determined that would be provided for salary increases, and it was, correct me if I'm wrong, the union actually had,
Distributed the money on the
and how they distributed the money on the step schedule.
Okay, so they had control over that.
So they had control over where that money was placed based on where they thought it should go. So, one of the other things that the superintendent asked me to cover this evening was the revenue source, and maybe speak a little bit about what sections of the budget are funded by what types of revenues. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory. In this one, we're just going to say comes from the general fund, it comes from the aid fund, comes basically from our foundation money. Our next big area, of course, is health insurance. We know this year what our expenditures are going to be. If you happen to have a budget from this current fiscal year, and you are so inclined necessarily to go in and look up what might be an appropriated dollar amount, you won't necessarily find that number matching what we have. What we are trying to show you is what we think our actual expenditure is going to be in these categories. So there might be a little bit of differentiation from what could have been budgeted last year at about this time. So we believe that everything's staying constant, which of course personnel changes all the time, but based on where we are right now, our expenditures for 11-12 are $5,286,563, and we are projecting a $443,000 increase to $5,734,424. This, in my mind, is a very conservative increase. I honestly think it reflects the increase that we saw from last year to this current fiscal year. We don't know what the real increase is going to be yet. We really don't get that information generally from the trust until February, so it's not super timely for our needs, but that is the best they say they can do. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this number go up a little bit, honestly, but that is the best information we have. And right now, that going with what we know from this current fiscal year's increase, we feel is smart and conservative. So This category budget is also funded through the general fund, the aid fund, general things, like I said, from foundation aid, or of course, other revenue sources to include tax levy and other miscellaneous, income, but generally it's in the general fund. Is there a better way to do this? Sorry, now you know I use paper. Okay. Teacher retirement system, another very large area, almost $2.5 million this year. Next year, based on what we know, again, the rates are, at this point, they've provided us with a range, but we feel as though based on the current projections for next year's budget, our expenditures are about $286,460. Again, it's the revenue source is just the general fund or the aid fund.
That percentage, I believe the range that KRS gave was 11.5 to 12.5, and we used a 12% figure for 2012-13. This year, the figure, contribution figure is 11.11%.
11. They at least gave us a range, and it should, whatever they give you the range, I really haven't seen it be outside of the range. So going with 12% is probably pretty fair estimate at this point. Employee retirement system, we have fewer employees in this retirement system, which makes sense since the bulk of our employees are teachers. 994,476 in our current fiscal year, going up about 203,000 to 1,197,549. And again, the source of funding for this is the general fund. Special education. Of course, this is an area we have very little control, as we all know. Our expenditures, I should explain what's in this. This one, I struggle with a little bit on how to present it. Basically, these numbers here, the 2.7 million, does not include the cost of our staff. So this does not include, Hamburg's special ed teachers or teacher aides that might be a personal aide or be in the room with the kids. It doesn't include our staffing. What this number includes is basically kids that we have that are in out-of-district placements, either private placements and public placements at BOCES. So this does include the BOCES placements. Also includes things like equipment that we have to purchase for our kids, supplies, things like that. So basically, it does not include the cost of the staff that would be our staff in district. Now the revenue on this is a little more interesting. It's a little more complicated. We do get some of the money from foundation aid. So of the 14 million and change that we get in foundation aid, almost 3 million of that really specifically earmarked for special education. In addition to that, there's two other aids that they do break out, and once we get further into the budget process, you really start to look at revenues. You'll see that it's called high cost aid and private excess cost aid, which is really just fancy terms for really expensive out-of-district students that are either in private or public placements, that the cost is so high for them to be there that they get special aid for them to be in those placements. All of this aid is driven based on previous year expenditures, so it doesn't always line up with what your costs are, but it stays relatively consistent because even though special education students change where they're going to be serviced, or some might come into the district, or some might go out and be classified, it generally stays relatively constant if you look historically over time. So the aid you receive on it does generally offset to the extent that it's expected to your expenses. If we had put in this slide the cost of the teachers, so you know, this budget really is over $7 million. We're going to add like $4.5 million into strictly payroll, not benefits, not health insurance, not salary. So this slide's a little misleading, and so I wanted to be clear that you understand. Because we do have a slide that was about staffing, I didn't want to double dip and confuse it. Does anybody have a question? Special? Or move on? BOCES, now, I have a little asterisk to say, now, the BOCES slide does not include special education placement, which was on the previous special ed slide. So these are basically BOCES services that we purchase. I'm showing a minimal increase. I'm hoping that it'll only be something like that, although we really don't know yet because the BOCES budget is not made available to us until January to even start to take a look at. They do claim that they're trying very hard to keep their costs flat or maybe a little increase because of the difficult times that everybody, including BOCES, is experiencing. One of the things that might move this is included in these numbers here are kids that are at career tech kids are in there. So if those numbers move, which we won't know at this point, or we allow them to move, that could clearly reflect the increase, then the increase really would be inappropriate. So this one's very iffy in my mind. If everything remains constant, it's probably where we'll be. But if we see some changes, which we don't know yet because it's just a little too soon, this slide may very well be altered.
Remind me when you say services from BOCES, other than career tech,
Oh,
what sorts of things is that?
there's all kinds of things that the district purchases coasters for administrative services, for curriculum development, for workshops and admin things, and there's a laundry list of things.
Even paper goods, it seems to me. Is there some sort of paper sorts of things we get with them or no?
No, not really supplies. They're really all
Administrative functions?
no, not really. There's things like Global Connect is in here. They have a whole laundry list of different types of services that you can purchase to support the running of the school district, whether it be things that support students or things that support staff.
Is that our internet stuff, or is that separate?
No, it is that BOCES land and land go through yep, goes through that. A lot of technology, software, e-school, IEP Direct programs are administrative programs. Software programs.
No one? I've read so much, I was skipping half the revenue, okay. This is, our source of aid is our BOCES aid. BOCES aid is a little hard to explain, because it's really a little, it's almost like intervention. There's a real secret way they calculate BOCES aid, and that's no lie. BOCES aid is based on previous year expenditures. You could take what we feel as though is our percentage of BOCES aid, which is about 74% of our BOCES expenditures are reimbursed. Although it's not quite that simple. You can't just say, okay, that's what we spent last year, we'll multiply it times 74%, and that's what we get. It doesn't really work that way. There's certain things that they refund to you based on participation level of all component districts in the BOCES. There's certain prior year expenditures that they get back to you. There's certain things that if you put it in the BOCES budget, you don't expend it, you just plainly get it back. So all of that makes actually the computation of what you can anticipate extremely convoluted and almost impossible. Some folks will say they can do it, but I really just rather wait until I get the run and take a look at it. Before you get the run, they give you a sheet that you have to go through and confirm that you've purchased all these services. So, but it's very difficult. This is what we're receiving this year is $1,580,000. It's pretty close to making sense to me of what our expenditures were in 2010-11. They were slightly less than 1.7. So this aid, I feel as though is flowing properly. Although, like I said, it's very difficult to analyze and completely drill down.
So I just have a question. So that 1.7 million, that's what we spend, but we get technically almost 70-some% back. So
Yes,
it's not
next
really.
year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's like the building aid, you get it back after the fact. You have to spend the money up front, and after the fact, you have to come back.
Building aid is probably not a real good example, but it is, it's a reimbursement aid. Basically, you spend it, and next year you get your aid on it. So whatever we spend this year, next year in 12-13 will be aided on that as a revenue. So it makes it a little difficult to project because you can put it in your budget and think, okay, this is what we're going to spend. But as we all know, you don't really spend your entire budget, so it's a little difficult to say. You can come close, and if you're conservative in your thinking, it usually works out.
Do you get that like in a lump sum, or do you just, or do we get it throughout the year based on
We get it
previous
throughout the
year's
year.
purchases? Roughly.
They calculate at the end of the year what's been expended, and it is provided to us just like all of our other statement, which is dispersed throughout the school year. Transportation, what we believe we're going to expend by the end of the school year is $4,029,000 and change. And we expect to be somewhere a little closer to $4,188,000 or $159,000 increase. Transportation aid is also a reimbursement aid. You get back in the next year what you spent the previous year, you're aided on that. So this year, our 2.547 was based on our 10-11 expenditures.
Oh, sorry, and why the increase in transportation aid? Is that just fuel cost or contract?
Our contract is going to be subject to CPI, so we're projecting conservatively a 4% increase across the board. It may very well not end up being that much, but at this point, I feel much more comfortable being conservative. It's a lot easier to take it out than just to try to, to go, so we got to put it back in later.
Based on that, sometimes there was no increase.
Right, that's true. Then we'll know that. It would really be nice if all this information would fall in our time frame of when we needed to build a proper budget, but it all comes in sort of staggered way, and some of it is just so late that you just hope that you put the right information in the budget because it's too late to adjust it. One of the things we're looking at when we have a company that's coming into the district, they've been in once to review our state aid and help us potentially collect state aid from years past that perhaps we didn't maximize because we didn't necessarily have the opportunity or the staffing to file everything that maybe we needed to have been filed. So transportation, I think, is one of the areas we're going to find that our aid is not, historically has not been flowing completely freely. How's that? I think that we should be able to receive more transportation aid. It feels a little light to me. It's one of those things where you've been doing it long enough and you look at it and you're like, it doesn't seem like there's quite enough of it there. So that's all, your aid is all generated based on how you file all your state aid forms. And it's a very complicated, convoluted. It takes a lot of detail to necessarily get them right. And sometimes people don't do it right even though they try real hard. So we have somebody that's come in and they're looking at that. And what's nice is that there's no charge to us. They're going to take part of the aid if they find any, or when we actually see the money in the bank. So it's sort of a win-win for us. And transportation is one of the areas that we are really looking at to see if maybe we missed out on some aid along the way. Because all of that $4 million is not completely aidable. There's certain things that are disallowed. So, but that is what we expect from transportation. Utilities, even with our energy education program, which my understanding is going very well, we are anticipating to come in well in the budget with that. We're still planning for an increase, even if our energy education program is completely successful. We can still anticipate an increased cost in utilities and fuel outside of the purchase of fuel for buses, just based on the fact that we anticipate energy costs continue to creep along, becoming a little more expensive. So we are planning for a utility increase. The source of revenue on utilities is general fund budget. Debt service we talked about, so I won't linger on the slide too much. We're looking at a $659,000 increase from this current fiscal year to 1213. Our building aid is probably going to be pretty similar, even though we have an increase. Our debt service, even though we have an increased debt service payment for one of the projects is already going to start to generate aid. So we factored that in. And what's interestingly is within our debt service is that this year and last year, we actually were realizing more building aid than we had debt. And that's just a matter of the way that we receive debt service. Debt service is paid on what's called level debt, so the payment is pretty flat every year. It's kind of like your mortgage. You pay the same thing, but your principal and your interest fluctuate over time of what makes up your mortgage payment, but your mortgage payment kind of always stays the same except maybe your last one. That's the way our aid is paid. So we are fortunate that some of the aid that we've been receiving, we didn't have necessarily offsetting debt. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was a little bit. But that's going to help us this upcoming year because now we do have more aid, or excuse me, we do have more debt. Even though we'll see a little bit of aid, that cushion is going to absorb a little bit of the pain. So I'm thinking that our building aid, which is our primary source, our only source of debt service funding, other than the taxpayer, is probably going to be pretty close to what we saw this year. My goal. Of course, we won't see any of that until January. And that was all of our primary areas. Some of the other areas that we didn't put up there are contractual services, teacher supplies, or district-wide supplies, things like that. And that basically makes up the balance of the budget.
Just, again, as Barb indicated in the beginning, keep in mind that this information will change. Because what you're seeing in terms of the salary and benefit information is, that was a snapshot in time of the employees in each bargaining unit at that particular point in time, based on what they were earning, what benefits they had, and then projecting out the various costs. Keep in mind we have varying circumstances each year where we'll have the utilization of substitute teachers both for regular events that occur within the district. We have longer-term illnesses sometimes where we'll bring in a sub plus paid benefits. So the budget will evolve to include more FTEs in that area, and you'll see an increase in some of those line items because of the adjustments we have to make. Barb will be using historical data to take a look at how many positions will increase that budget line by to make sure we can accommodate some of those instances that will occur during the course of the school year. So you are seeing subject to change, and as we go through this, we will point that out to you as well. Any questions or? Okay, Barb, thank you.
Before we move on to the public expression, we actually have 4 people who signed up. I want to read a statement. During the last month's board meeting, a concern was expressed regarding the board's practice of voting on consensus items included in the agenda. It was suggested that the board was violating the open meetings law or perhaps federal law by not discussing each item included in the consent agenda and voting on each item individually. We asked our legal counsel to look into this concern to ensure that we're abiding by all of the applicable laws. Our attorneys confirmed the New York State open meetings law does not prohibit the Board of Education from using the consent agenda and taking one vote on all of the consensus matters. In addition, there's no federal law which discusses procedures for a Board of Education meeting for public school districts in New York State. I want to assure all members of the public that prior to each meeting, board members are provided information regarding each item to be voted on by consensus and have the opportunity to review that information. If a board member has a question or would like to discuss a particular item, he or she may ask to remove the item from the consent agenda, and so there can be further discussion during the open session. Most, if not all, boards of education and other boards use consent agendas because the practice is efficient and prudent in light of the extensive duties and responsibilities of a board. By having one vote address non-controversial items of business, the board can then focus on items that do require discussion and debate by the board members in open session. Furthermore, our meeting minutes can contain detailed information about all items included in the consent agenda. We appreciate that this concern has been raised, and we have confirmed that the use of a consent agenda was conducted in a lawful manner. As such, we will continue to use the consent agenda and adhere to the open meetings law. We now do have time to have people who would like to address the board. We have 4 people who are written down here. Sally Stevenson, Brianna Fuertes, Martha Kavanaugh, and Nicole Lasinski. We'd like to try to have the item to be addressed so that we know what that's going to be about. We do have an item written down for 3 of them. Sally, before you present, could you please let us know what you're going to be addressing us on?
Yes. You already speak now?
Yeah, you can go. That's okay. Thank you.
In the newspaper today, cost-cutting measures in the Canton district, they're looking at extending the walking distances for some of the students according to state law. I mean, that's one area you could look at as to a cost-cutting measure. I think that's important. And actually why I put miscellaneous, because I just wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday. That's why I'm miscellaneous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brianna. Fuertes, yes?
One time, ma'am.
Do you want to come up front?
I'm good right here.
Oh, you're good there, okay.
We don't fight, right?
I'm here on behalf of the GSA. My brother couldn't make it today, so he wanted me to speak for him. So he had an orchestra concert, but he wanted to share his story with you. He says, I was bullied all throughout middle school, and unfortunately in high school, I was harassed and shoved, punched, hit with books, and when I came out freshman year, I felt comfort in GSA and at the high school. GSA made me and many others here more confident in ourselves and in the staff. Bullying is quite an issue in this school district and many others, and having GSA made it so much better. Passing GSA as a club would help many other students overcome bullying and harassment. In addition, the group of people that are in GSA are probably the best group of people that you'll ever meet. They're like a family, so it would mean a lot if it was passed for you. And for everyone else, it made a big difference in my brother's life. I can't even tell you. When my brother was started being bullied in middle school, he wouldn't say anything. He would tell my mom, he would tell the counselors, and when it started escalating was when something was actually done. And when he finally came out freshman year, I couldn't tell you how proud I was of him. It's probably the hardest thing to do for a 14-year-old. And starting GSA, I can't even tell you the difference in confidence that I've seen in him. He's become such a great kid. He's done so good in school. He can actually speak his mind without being afraid of being judged. He can have so much more confidence in himself and defend himself, where I remember when I used to have to defend him for him because I was afraid he was gonna get hurt. And when all this stuff about bullying came out, where people started hurting themselves and ending their lives, it's okay. My biggest fear was thinking that because of my brother's choice, that he would end up just like them, and that was my fear. And I told my mom and my family, and having this club made that much more difference to make me feel more comfortable. And having it around, I can't even tell you the difference I've seen in the school, that people are more accepting of it. So it would mean a lot to me and to the GSA and to my brother to be past it as a club. And personally, I think it should be passed in every school district. I think it's the greatest thing to have. So.
I know Mrs. Lamondola is in the audience today, and I just want to let you know that that is on our personnel agenda this evening to recognize the club and Mrs. Lamondola as the advisor.
Yep, hi.
Would you like to say anything?
Right now?
Sure.
Sure.
I just would like to get an update from you, so it's perfect time,
Hi,
good.
I'm the school social worker, Susan Mikowski, school psychologist, Nadine Siegel. I'll help facilitate it. Jane, Selena, David are all of our officers from GSA, and I'm so proud of you, Brian, for sharing that story. Chris Brentis is our secretary. In December, 2 years ago this month, I had a student, a young man named Nick. He came to me and said, Lamondola, you know I've had depression. I worked with this young man, and he was suicidal at one time. And he said, school has been so difficult for me. I want to start a GSA here, and I need your help to do that. And he ended up graduating early as a junior, a full year early to get out. And his exact words to me were, I'm not going to enjoy the benefits of this club, but if we start this club, which we did in March 2010, the generations after me, the years after me will have the benefits. So in his legacy, this club has been meeting informally for nearly 2 years, every other Monday. We are now running strong between 40 and 60 students and staff. A lot of the staff here tonight all attend our meetings. I would say just personally, out of all the things I've done as a school social worker, this has been just about the biggest highlight of my career. And especially in the passing of Jamie Rodemeyer, it has touched and impacted us tremendously. Having the support of Mr. Akramovich, Mr. Jetter, Colleen Sad has been really inspiring. You've all come to our meetings, and I can't thank you enough. So we just want to be acknowledged. Basically, we want to be able to be in the school yearbook and march in a parade and go to the pep rallies and deck the halls, right? Anything else? Anything else?
No.
Okay.
Announcements.
And announcements. We kind of stuck that in, but so we just are looking for acknowledgement. That's all.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much.
And I just would tell the board that in terms of an advisor of the club, I've been extremely impressed by Mrs. Lamondola's operation of the club in terms of the information presented, the speakers that come in, and just how that club is operated is extremely high level. Thank you.
And when it comes to consensus items, this is indeed something that we're voting on tonight, right?
Yes,
Is
it
that
is.
correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you very much. Martha, we have you next.
I would just like to advise the board regarding the APPR that was passed about a month ago, I think, at a board meeting. That had not been passed by the HTA membership. There had been some confusion regarding that, at least in the HTA, of which I'm a member. So I would like to just advise the Board of Education that that issue that was voted on and passed by the board had not, in fact, been agreed upon by the membership of the HTA. And I'd like that to go on the minutes for the Board of Education meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Nicole Lozinski.
Hi. I'm Nicole Lozinski. I'm a National Board Certified Teacher. I've been teaching for 10 years, and I teach 10th grade English at the high school right now. I'm coming here because I believe that, we all believe that it's our job as educators to create successful students who become productive members of society. So, I'm here today to encourage you to propose to the community a budget that's actually above the 2% levy for the reason of the fact of retaining our teachers in order to sustain high levels of academic achievement in our buildings. I honestly believe that the taxpayers have a vested interest in our community. I think they share our belief in this room that a strong school district creates a strong community and a strong future. I think that we shouldn't have fear of rejection. I think instead we should have faith that at least 60% of the community would be in favor of this. because of the fact that, once again, it would retain the high quality that they have in their community. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Okay. Information items for the board. Can we jump to our student representative?
Basically in the high school, Dr. Hall started yesterday. And I know a lot of clubs are talking about how they, do you know what Dr. Halls is?
Explain it to me.
Okay. Dr. Halls is something that like clubs and organizations do. We had a new club, the BOE classes are doing recycling around the world. They're doing it in their hallway, and it's just, they decorate the halls and it gets everyone in the Christmas spirit and makes high school look nice. So I know the seniors always opt out and just do like a purple Christmas in the foyer. So it's kind of nice. But the one complaint that I had was everyone spends all this time decking the halls and they get done right before voting, because we vote and the club gets money, and then they have to tear it all down. So we started a week earlier this year, so it's this week and next week, but voting is still Friday. That way next week we can just open it up and enjoy it and not worry about tearing it down. So, next, winter sports started, basketball, I know there's a game tonight, guys do, and bowling and girls basketball and indoor track too. Then last week we had a plethora of luncheons, and one of our luncheons that we had Monday was with technology, and about 6 of the students and went and talked with you and about the technology that we had in our school, the blocks we had on our